Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Just let me mute my sound real quick. I'm here taking a very quick look at Overcooked. This is a 4-player co-op game that just came out on the Nintendo Switch. Came out like last week by the time you see this. But I got an email from Team 17 saying, hey, we'd be more than happy to start sending you Switch games. Would you like a copy of Overcooked? And I'm like, okay, sure. But the lady, I was like, oh, I can only play, like, single-player games. So the lady was like, well, if you can get someone, we would fully recommend that you would get a friend or a family member to play this game with, because it's very co-op based. So I did actually manage to find someone. This is my, well, I'm not sure how old he is, but he's like, anywhere between 10 and 13, old neighbor, who is playing this game with me right now, or at least in this footage, because this footage is from footage I took yesterday while we were just playing the game, roughly. And this is footage from our hour and a half that we spent playing it, and I have a few thoughts about it. I figured I'd come and tell you about them. So, in case you're not paying attention to the gameplay footage, which is absolutely fine, my voice is very distracting, it is a up to 4-player co-op game where you need to prepare meals for people by, for example, preparing them using specific tools, getting them out of the ingredient bins, and then putting them on the plate to go out to the people. Somehow. Like, some of these stages are ridiculous. Like, one of the stages literally has you throwing stuff off the back of a truck. It really doesn't make any sense. But it still works, and the whole idea is you have to control 2 or more chefs. The game can be played with up to 4 people, as you run around trying to figure out just what the bloody hell you're supposed to do. The faster you get orders done, the more money you get, but if you let them time out, as you can see by those little bars going away up in the top left, you will lose money. Some of the stages also have some ridiculous gimmicks, like as you can see on this little boat stage here, the walls will slide back and forth, and the scene's about to change. This one in particular doesn't have any stages, but it's still a pretty good stage for demonstrating how the game works. It's a very chaotic game because you need to be running around constantly, and basically, if you're playing this with 2 people, it feels like both people need to grow a third hand. It is a surprisingly complex game to work with more than 2 people. You have to get all the ingredients out of the bins, tenderize them, cook them, and then put them out on the plate, and then take the plates and then wash them sometimes. Sometimes you don't have to do that. But it's still very chaotic trying to do all this with 2 people, so you do kind of need to, as you can see, I've kind of screwed up here and realized that I need to put the buns on the plates first before it'll even let me do anything. But yeah, also the fact that I'm carrying around uncooked meat. I don't want to go serving uncooked meat to people. But yeah, the game turns into absolute chaos in no time at all, just because you end up in a position where people have to constantly be swapping roles if you're playing with 2 people. You can play this game solo. However, you end up in control of 2 chefs, and you can't control more than one at a time. You have to swap between them with the shoulder buttons. The game's controls are very simple. You have one button for doing actions like chopping stuff up on the board. You have a button to pick up an ingredient and put down an ingredient. And you also have a dash button that the game doesn't actually tell you about. We found it by accident, but that still means it still works on a sideways Joy-Con. So if you have 2 pairs of Joy-Cons, well, you can play this game with up to 4 people. And honestly, I would probably recommend playing it with 3 or 4 people more than I would 2 people, because as I said before, playing this game with 2 people really does feel like you both need to grow a third arm. It just feels like there's too much to do. Sure, you can go to the effort of playing stages over and over again in order to find out what the best strategy is, and it is entirely possible to do a pretty good run in this game. And I do have a run at the very end where we messed up one order, and that was like the one order that kept us from getting 3 stars on the level. It is entirely possible to give people like their own specific roles and have it play out like that, but let me put it this way, unless you are ridiculously in sync, you are not going to be able to pull it off, especially with some of the ridiculous mechanics they throw at you, like this one here where there's conveyor belts pushing stuff around and all the ingredients are on the left, and all of the serving and dishwashing, or all of the serving, I should say, is on the right, and all the plates start out on the right too. You've also got disposal bins, which you can accidentally throw shit into, which I have done before more than once. It is, seriously, this game just gets absolutely chaotic, and I will admit that it is actually pretty damn fun. They've done a really good job with building and balancing the game to make things absolutely chaotic, and it is a surprisingly good time just going around and trying to get all this shit done. But as I said before, might be a little bit too chaotic for 2 people, just a little bit. because trying to do everything at once just, like, absolutely floored me and the guy I was playing with. I'm not going to say his name out loud, just in case he doesn't want his name on the internet, but it is surprisingly difficult to keep all this stuff in check all at the same time, so it is well worth... It's probably worth skipping if you don't want to be stressed out about that sort of thing, just because of, just how bloody insane it can get from time to time. There's a fair few levels that the game unlocks, and the problem is, you do need to get a certain amount of stars, which means getting a certain amount of money. There is a story, but it's basically nothing. You're literally just... You've literally gone back in time to try and fight off the gigantic, spaghetti meatball monster, and you do that by learning how to cook. Yeah, that is pretty much the entire campaign. You've got a map that you can roam around, which you'll see on the footage shortly, and you have to get a certain amount of stars on every level in order to progress to the next one. And as you can see here, we didn't do particularly well outside of the first set of levels. So, yeah, the amount of stars you need starts to get exponentially larger as time goes on, and at the 90-minute mark, we were like, oh god, we can't do this. And we just kind of, not so much gave up on the prospect, but we ended up spending a fair bit of time trying to figure out what levels we could do better, and, well, we kind of pulled it off a couple of times. The game's performance isn't... It's alright when you don't have too much stuff going. But as you can see here, everything got set on fire, and the performance just kind of drops to the floor. The game is a lot better than what I heard. It doesn't drop anywhere near as much as the initial reviews I read for this game implied, but I am playing it with the performance patch. So that would be a that would probably be the reason why it runs particularly well in comparison to some of the other reviews I may have read about this game. But yeah, the game itself though, still pretty damn good. I don't really have a massive amount of problems with it other than play it with like more than 2 people. That's literally the only thing I can really say about it that's a problem. You really do need 3 people to make this sort of thing work. I'm not entirely sure if they scale the amount of money you need for particular stars, depending on the amount of players you have, but still, it is... I would still recommend playing this with more than 2 people, just so the amount of jobs doesn't get too overwhelming. You do also get a bunch of other things as well with this, like you do get versus maps, where 2-on-2 is a thing, where you can control 2 chefs at once and you try and get a better score than the other player. And you also have some extra campaigns on top that you can play without even playing the main campaign, but they do recommend you play the main campaign. So there is a fair amount of stuff to do, at the very least. I mean, 90 minutes and we hadn't even seen like a third of the game's levels, I'm pretty sure. So there would be a fair amount of stuff for you to do, especially you have to go back and try and be more efficient. Right now, the run that's playing is a full run and it's not just a snippet. This is the full run that we nearly got 3 stars on, and we were relatively efficient, although not massively efficient, and this is actually a pretty cool mechanic here. I will give the game a lot of praise for coming up with a lot of silly ideas for levels. Like, seriously, look at this. This is horrendously dangerous. But the game itself is pretty good. If you have more than 1 friend that you can play this with and you've got a Switch to play it on, then yeah, I have no real reason for you not to pick it up and give it a go. It is currently available on the pretty much every Switch store that you can imagine, every Switch region that you can imagine, I should say. I don't think Japan has it yet, maybe, but I mean, still, it's available now, pretty much. And while there is one other thing though, the controls are a little bit annoying sometimes. The precision of the analog sticks is not as high as would be desired, and this does lead to a couple of mistakes here and there. Not too hard to get used to, but it's just worth mentioning. But yeah, other than that, the game itself is still pretty enjoyable, and I don't really have that big of a problem with it. I mean, don't play it solo, and don't play it with only 1 friend. Play it with more than 1 friend, but other than that, go nuts. Still a pretty damn good game. And I'm actually kind of impressed that something so chaotic works so well. Goodbye, lettuce. But yeah. I'm just going to shut up now and let the game's sound effects and music play in the background for the next 2 minutes. So, this has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.